Welcome to Gatecrashers, a podcast dedicated to kicking open the door to your next favorite thing. Our mission, our creed, and our code is this: to make all things more approachable and accessible to everyone. We want you to find a universe that you'll fall in love with. Today, we're joined once again by the co-creator, co-writer, artist, and designer of Echolands, J.H. Williams III. The book was co-created with W. Haden Blackman, with colors by Dave Stewart and letters by Todd Klein, and additional designs by Drew Gill. The hardcover drops in early August, and you absolutely want to buy this book. Call your shop, pre-order it, whatever you got to do, because it's incredible. JH, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm very excited to be here with you. I'm very excited to actually be able to buy this and have it in my hands. I'll be honest, everything that I've read so far has been digital. So getting to hold the genuine article is going to be incredible for me.
Yeah, it'll definitely be a different experience. Yeah,
that's why I'm so because I have the iPad Pro, like the big one, but like I want to be able to like hold it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like Echolands is a very particular book in a way where reading it in physical format is beneficial. More greatly beneficial than the typical comic, I guess you could say, in a physical form, because the format is so distinct for what we're doing.
It truly is. And it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's just all 2-page spreads. That's what you would call the art, right?
Pretty much. Okay. Yeah. There's the occasional spot here or there where I might break it. Where you can read one half on one side and another half on the other side, but still presented to you as a spread by some sort of design aspect that might be centered on between the 2 pages. But for most of it, it does read from left to right all the way across.
It's incredible. So the last time we spoke right before issue 1 came out, and I had asked you how you were feeling, and you said you were nervous. How do you feel now that you're 1 volume into this?
Still nervous. It doesn't. I don't think it's changed. There's, if anything, I feel even more pressure in a weird way, because I know the level of work that we have to put into it, and we have a publishing gap to deal with. But that's completely unavoidable because the amount of time this work is taking. As an example, I'm on issue 7 now, which is the next chapter after volume 1, and I haven't even thought to look at the calendar how long it's taking me to do it. It's ridiculous, but hopefully when people see what we're doing, they'll understand why everything in that part of the story takes place. Hopefully it's not much of a spoiler, but it takes place in Horror Hill, and it's all fully rendered artwork for that, to try to capture this old school 1970s horror vibe to it, but mostly in black and white. It's insanely time consuming. So
I know you work physically, right? So like all of your stuff is by hand.
Yes.
Are these pages is the physical page itself as large as it is in the comic? Like, are you working on something that is this long, or is it like you're using 2 different sheets?
I have to take 2 different sheets and tape them together. It's basically the same way you would do a double page spread in a portrait format, where you take 2 sheets and you butt them together, unless if you happen to be someone who can find boards that are that size to work on. I know some people are able to find double-sized boards to work on. I don't do that because I have to scan it 1/2 at a time anyway. So I don't find that.
Was my next question.
Yeah, I don't find it overly necessary to do that. Also makes it a little more economical to ship art, like if someone buys a page. But once the boards are taped together, a single spread on my table is like 34 inches across. So
damn.
it can
I was
be a
gonna
bit
say,
tricky.
how are you storing this stuff? Where can you physically keep this pages this big? But I guess if you're cutting it in half, it's a little bit easier.
Yeah. So because I tape the pages together using archival tape that's acid free. So the pages can fold in half without damage. And so that makes it much easier to store. In my office space here, I've got, quite a bit of storage zones here, and some things are in portfolios too.
Interesting. So with this, every issue kind of opens with like a quote, and typically they're from made up sources. As I'm reading this, I'm wondering, are there any turns of phrase or quotes that are important to you as a person? Like, are there any ones that you return to often?
Oh, let me see. I think I have something on my desktop here, or did I not keep that? Well, hell, I thought I kept that. I did have a quote on my desktop that I appreciated a lot, but taped to my desk, oddly enough, under one of my work lights, I have. You're gonna laugh at this. It's a fortune cookie, fortune, taped up there, but it says, I'll read it to you. Simply says, "Believe it can be done."
I like that.
Yeah, and I've never seen another fortune cookie with that phrase in it, and it's pretty interesting. But when I saw that, I'm like, oh, I gotta keep that. That's a good reminder to push yourself, to not be afraid to take risks here and there,
I love that. Yeah, I have one pinned. I think it's over here, and it just says, "I'm a noted workaholic," and it just says, "Your work is not your worth." Just to remind myself.
Right.
But it's interesting, that it's just a fortune cookie. I like that. So we were speaking a little bit beforehand. I do want to warn that there may be spoilers. I have a couple of questions that are spoilers, but I'll warn the audience before we get there. But we've gotten to see a lot more of the world now that we're in issue 6. So I wanted to talk about a couple of those worlds that we get to see and your inspirations, because each has its own distinctive look that typically you'd see in 10 different books. Here you've got them all in one.
Right.
So Nassau Islands. What was your big inspiration behind the pirate vibes? What are things you look at for inspiration for those characters and that kind of port world?
Well, one of the things we want to do with Treasure Island is, since it's off the coast of San Francisco, or our version of San Francisco, we wanted it to be not unsimilar in the fact that it's a mishmash of different people who come there seeking whatever fortunes they may find. And so when we designed Treasure Island, and we don't have very much space to get across the information in that sequence, but we want, the one little glimpse that we get on a spread of the village where we see a bit of a marketplace. I want a variety of characters that could be from all over the place that are different looking than our main cast. So that was one of our goals, is this, diversity of cultures clashing there. I wanted some of the structures on the island, like when you first look at that scene, you can kind of see some buildings and they look pretty rudimentary. I wanted them very rudimentary and almost like something you might see in the old pirate village, in the past. But then in the distance, when you see Romulus's palace, you could say, I wanted something that was more maybe Middle Eastern or Moroccan in influence to that. So it has this dome-shaped top with scales going down the curvature, things like that, and the colors are a little bit more pastel-y. But then when we get to the interior of it, of it, it's a little bit Moroccan influenced as well. But then I wanted some stonework that made you think of something a little bit more Gothic in nature, like castle-like stonework. And then through the a couple sequences that we had of that, where we see a big giant sign that goes across the top that says Treasure Island, I wanted something that felt almost like you're entering almost a stereotypical how do I put this? Almost like a themed zone. So it has this, it says Treasure Island, it's carved in wood, and it has a giant skull and crossbones on it. So it's almost overt and being in your face about this world, I guess you could say. And then with some of the panel arrangements, I wanted something in parts of it that what I told Dave when he colored it, I said, as far as the colors, I said, think Kirby meets Moroccan. And even though the layouts were, the panel shapes were simple. And so he kind of knew what that meant to use contrasting pastel colors with these kind of curving shapes that combine with some rigid shapes. And the result is pretty fascinating.
I really like the idea that you said, I know you were trying to escape at the theme.
Yeah.
I don't want to compare it to like a theme park or something, but I love that idea that like there's these two separate sections that you're like clearly making the jump between. And you did mention Romulus. You mentioned. So I'm going to jump to that planet next because Fourth Rome.
Yes.
What was your inspiration there?
Well, we wanted to make sure, as we were developing the world of Echolands, the fact that we chose the word echo, everything that we're seeing here in our story is an echo of something we understand or know, be it pop culture or be it.
You just blew my mind.
I
should have asked that first.
Yeah, being mythical or being historical. And so when Romulus, we decided, early on, we wanted him to come from what we were going to call, I think at the time we might not have called it Fourth Rome. It was called New Rome, possibly. But when we decided on various styles for the characters, I was really like, oh, this guy needs to, everything about him speaks to me like he's some sort of Kirby, like out of a Kirby comic. And so we decided to call it Fourth Rome as a little nod to Fourth World. But our idea is like, okay, if Echolands, we have all these lands, they're clearly derivative of things we recognize. So Fourth Rome is like, it's like this altered, strange version of the Roman Empire. But skewed through this, the Echolands lens. And so we're like, well, if we call it Fourth Rome, does that possibly mean that there were a Rome 2 and a Rome 3 before that? You know what I mean? And so it kind of speaks to the cultural evolution of where he's from. That's just one example of some of the things we're doing with the various locations. Eventually, we're going to get to see Fourth Rome, which is going to be fun as hell.
I'm so excited.
So yeah, there's a lot of Kirby influence in it, kind of feeding off the idea of this skewed version of Roman Empire culture that still exists.
I'm seeing some of the Kirby crackle and stuff that you and Dave do because of the colors. Holy moly! Like it's just so beautiful.
Thanks.
Now, I just want to talk quickly about Old Chicago before getting to what I'm most excited to talk about. Now, Old Chicago kind of has the vibe of like, I don't know, like a pulp, like detective style city. Is that what it's going for?
Yeah, it's very pulpy, very Dick Tracy.
That's it, Dick Tracy.
Yeah, so everyone from there, like the one glimpse that so far, the only person we've met from old Chicago is Castrom, but we do get a glimpse in one of the scenes where he's talking about why he ended up in San Francisco. We get to see a glimpse of the cops that he would have to deal with, and they all are weird, cartoony looking people like him. They have these, almost caricaturized features to their, faces and stuff. And we're hoping to get to show more of old Chicago in the future. We have some ideas of how to do that, because I think it'd be fun to do, an issue or two that takes place where he's from.
Interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, the main inspiration was sort of rooted in Dick Tracy comics and characters. So everything about that is that was my original root. It's slightly evolved from that. I'm not drawing Castrom as if he's drawn by Chester Gould, but you can see the influence of it.
As I'm reading this, I'm like looking at the character and like his cartoonish, as a like pulpy vibe, and I was like, God, I really want to see Michael Oeming draw him. And then I got to the end and I was like, oh, guess who did the variant or the cover of it? I was like, oh, perfect, I win.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So what I'm most excited to get into, and it was in issue 6 finally, was Horror Hill. I'm a really big horror person, so seeing this was like, I'm sorry for your hands again because of all those zombies, but is it influenced a lot by the Universal monster movies and like the Italian horror of like the Hammer era?
Yes. Any of the Hammer stuff, it has I guess I'm influenced by the Hammer stuff in some of the lighting I'm trying to capture, even though it's black and white like Universal monsters. And it's also a lot of inspiration from old 70s horror comics, a lot of those black and white horror magazine comics. There's a lot of that vibe to it too. It's all kind of like a mishmash of those things.
I'm a huge fan, and I don't want to get into any spoilers for the future, but will Rosa be taking a bigger spotlight moving forward in the series?
Sort of.
Okay.
As we established, it turns out she's, quite an important individual in the world of Echolands, particularly in Horror Hill itself. As far as, how much role does she play in the movement of where things are going, I'd say she's important, but everything still rests with hope. But clearly their relationship, by the time you are getting to the end of the first arc, has evolved into something from where it started, where they were sort of antagonistic with each other. Whether they'll ever find true safe ground amongst each other and consider each other more than just allies, time will tell.
Interesting. So with Echolands, is there a planned end, or are you ongoing?
It's ongoing, but we know we're building towards something very specific. And then we haven't decided what happens after that, but it's going to be around for a while.
Good. That's what I needed to hear.
Yeah. Definitely more than just one more arc. I think when people find out, the way the second arc is going to flow, I think we're not going to get to the big secret of what Echolands is in that arc. But when we finally do get to that point, people are going to be like, what the hell? And when we get to that point, it just, all the expansion that we're showing now and will continue to expand upon will come into crystallization, while at the same time blowing the doors wide open for something you didn't expect in terms of expanding the potential of where this thing can go.
And so this has been something you and Blackman have been developing for a while. How much of the world has been built out that we haven't, like, are you like filling notebooks with this stuff, or is this like something you're continuously progressing and creating?
Yeah, we have a Bible and an outline that spells out a lot of the different stuff. The things that are fleshed out the most are the things that we're definitely going to hit in the story and spend more time in. But we have notes about all the various lands. And we purposefully have left some zones open for us to kind of say, oh, well, let's decide to do this here. Because that's one of the things that's beautiful about the concept is that there's no limitations. And so we don't want to box ourselves in entirely. But for the most part, I'd say we have, 90% of what Echolands is. We know what it is, even if we might not get to fully see it or only get a taste of some of these locations. There will be a key issue coming up after we reveal what the Echolands is that kind of will give people better clarity. And then we're also going to get to see different places, touch on different places from Rabbit's point of view as he's trying to figure out how to get back to his friends. We'll get to see different locations of the Echolands that the main cast doesn't get to see.
So you mentioned Rabbit. So I'm asked about issue 5. So if you haven't read issue 5, just pause here. Holy shit. What an issue. Like the split. First up, how long did it take, if you can keep your sanity with this, how long did it take to design the robot parts of the issue? Because in between each panel until we meet the higher beings, there is so much mechanical, but not even just mechanical detail. There's like faces. There is a world within a world within a world in this, just the paneling itself.
Yeah.
How long does that take you to do, and how many like pencils do you go through?
I can go through quite a few pencils on an issue. I use non-photo blue pencils to kind of just rough things out, which is a softer lead. And then I just go straight to inks for my my noodling. It's not, I wouldn't say it's regular penciling, but because it's a softer lead, it burns through those pencils pretty fast, particularly if I'm trying to do something that needs higher concentration of construction. But that issue was very difficult. It was a tough challenge. We weren't sure how we were going to pull that off, but when we decided to tackle it, I was surprised at how it worked. Particularly because we're dealing with a comic that is already sideways. So its height is shortened already. And then we decided to split that height in half and tell 2 different threads. So that part was really, really tricky. I'd say the one thing that was helpful was the fact that we knew that's what we were doing on every page. So there wasn't, I didn't have to think about deviating from that. And so I could just concentrate on the stylistic aspects of each of those threads, story threads. The fun stuff about the robot island, Metamaru Mountain, was being able to draw it in a way where I didn't have to use lots of blacks in places and kept it open, which I think helped lend to the mechanical feel of it. But at the same time, I didn't want those mechanical aspects to be rigid necessarily. I wanted them to almost have a sense of organicness in the way they were being put on the page, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I thought that was important because we're saying these machines are alive. And so I kind of felt like giving like little organic aspects indicating that, or even using weird things like there's, in spots you'll see like these strange crystals growing out of things. That to me also speaks of an organic aspect.
There's it's on the page with Rosa talking about that album, but there's this one robot who is orange, white, and purple, but you can see that it's clearly got like joint balls in between each of its pieces.
Yeah.
So it's like very organic that like you can like look at that and be like, oh, that thing can move because it's got all this stuff going on. So
Right.
a lot of it feels mechanic, but in an organic way, if that makes sense. So like you can actually look at these things and be like, oh, that's how it's like sitting down. That's how it's going to sleep. Like you get it.
Right. And I wanted to do that in a way that wasn't overly complicated, to where like, as an example, when you see like really insanely designed Japanese mecha, as an example, that stuff is so complex. I didn't want something that was ultra complex like that. I wanted something that had a very simplified delivery of the aspect of the organicness of the mechanical parts. And a lot of that came from the inspiration for that came from being inspired by old Japanese toys. And so that kind of played a role in some of the simplicity of their body parts.
I was going to ask, because I was like, this doesn't feel like modern mecha or Gundam or anything like that. It feels more like classic toys.
Yeah.
I kind of, like, for me, it always goes to Megazords because born and raised on Power Rangers. So like seeing all, like, it's hard to even talk about it because this issue, like I read it 3 times because I was like, the fact that all of this stuff is going on the bottom where we're dealing with such complex themes like AI and like all that stuff, and the character we really like is lost. On top, we're dealing with our main cast and crew who have these almost like vignette moments where you're seeing characters interact in a more intimate, sometimes really intimate ways that we haven't gotten to see yet. Yeah. Was this your way of being able to show these characters for more than just like a group?
I think so. There's a couple things to note. In terms of Metamaru Mountain stuff, this kind of speaks a little bit to the previous question, but it speaks to the differences between the two threads also. So we designed these robots to be they're interesting looking and they're colorful and they're graphic, but there's this organic aspect to them. But then the simplicity of like old, robot toys presented. But then we very quickly show this really crazy idea of how complex their society is with the Bancho, this hive mind of all these AIs coming together to form for lack of a better term, the unimind of Metamaru Mountain, that is sort of the ruler and law giver of their land. So that dichotomy is very interesting to me, where you have the simplicity of these robot designs, but then underneath there's this complex notion of what AIs can be, in that the AI we're showing isn't of a single. It's not a single entity. It's a group of entities. Possibly hundreds of thousands of minds. Right. I find that pretty fascinating. But then up above on the top thread, we kept things on rather than on a science fiction level, we kept things on a more character moment level. It gave us this issue gave us the opportunity, which the previous issues did not have, where we get a real respite for the characters and get to see who they are more as people, while waiting for them, while they're trying to figure out what to do next. And I found that split between the two very fascinating. And the colorful robot world visually hits you in a very vivid way, while the top has this mood and atmosphere and almost a cool down effect compared to some of the other things. I thought that was super important to do, and it gave us a lot of context about who the people are, and even though even though Rabbit was separated from them, I feel like we get to kind of learn a little bit about his personality as well in his story in relation to the top. So I feel like that's how the two threads connect. And kind of getting more into who these people are and how they relate to each other, I thought was pretty fascinating. I love the scene between, Castrum and Dina. I thought it was
that was
cool.
what I wanted to talk about. I loved getting to see two characters interact and have a misunderstanding. Castrum wasn't meaning to say something hurtful, but you just it's the idea that you can't fully understand how someone else feels. And this issue combined the two things that I live for, which is the questioning of AI sentience and deep character moments of characters who I've grown to love, and getting quieter moments rather than having so much. And I have to commend your team, because I don't know, this is a bigger spoiler. I cannot in my mind pinpoint a story where the AI was like, we know how this story ends, and we don't want it to end that way.
Right.
We don't want to be the Terminators. We don't want that.
Right.
So they've just separated themselves, and I think that's a huge. I think it's a huge, not just a moment, but it's a very interesting thread.
Yeah.
Where did that idea come from to tell that, to not tell that we're evil story, the we turn on our masters type story?
Well, I mean, I think we were looking for a solution to a question we had, because we knew that we wanted Rabbit to wash up on Metamuru Mountain. Metamuru Mountain wasn't something that we thought about in the earlier drafts of our outline. It was sort of a middle of the road idea. And then when we decided to actually use it and have Rabbit wash up on there from being lost at sea, our big question was okay, well, we've shown San Francisco, which is this mishmash of people traveling there from all these various lands. So why didn't we see any giant robots? There's maybe one scene where we see a head of a robot that looks like it could be from there, but you're not quite sure. But we kind of okay, well then why are they isolated? We had to find solutions to things that were kind of plot hole questions. And that led to us figuring out, there was this, obviously they interacted with the rest of the Echolands previously, but became, like you outlined, fearful of the outcome. And so in that first scene where we first meet Ryoshin, he's citing the treaty that Rabbit is breaking by showing up there. And so it's it gave us a reason to have that so isolated, which leads to a fascinating aspect when Ryoshin decides, regardless of what the Banshou's fears are, feels a sense of responsibility to Rabbit, and that Rabbit shouldn't be killed. He shouldn't be ended in order to service this treaty. So it's almost like this unspoken thought process by Ryoshin, in that, well, if we deserve life, so does this little fleshy creature deserve life. We shouldn't destroy him because of our own stuff. And also has an unspoken thought process about Ryoshin, kind of well, maybe I kind of want to see what else is out there,
Ryoshin
kind of helping lead to the decision to help Rabbit return to his friends, but making this in order to gain knowledge, making a sacrifice that he cannot return to Metamuru Mountain, which I really kind of feels gives the idea of Ryoshin, this machine, a real sense of humanity, this desire of knowledge and exploration.
Very much so, because the thing he says as they're like leaving Metamaru Mountain, he's like, I've done all these jobs. I volunteer for dangerous jobs, catching meteorites, all that kind of stuff. But it's also taking rabbits home. It's like a very like it's a beautiful character moment, because he's just like, I'm gonna get you home. Like, you're my friend now, and I'm responsible. So it was I would talk about issue 5 all like this blew me away. Like, I love all of it, but this was just like everything just hit so well.
The other thank you, I really appreciate that. The other thing I'd like to mention about the machine's humanity, because Ryoshin could have easily come up with another solution. You know, they could have built Rabbit a little boat and sent him back out to the ocean. But the fact that he didn't and said, no, I will escort him. I will, even though it means sacrificing me returning, speaks to the longing that humanity has about seeing what is over the horizon. You know, that's a very human moment that the machine portrays there. Even though it's unspoken, it's all there in the unvoiced subtext.
I'm so excited to see where the Rabbit Lost in the Echolands story goes, because I really love these two already, and I've only gotten to meet them for half of an issue, literally.
Yeah. They're super fun, and on a more simplistic aspect, it just isn't like, oh, we're gonna get little adventures of this boy and his robot. It's just like, it's almost like a children's book idea there. I love that. Yeah, we've in issue 7 we get to see another scene with those two, and we're planning another one for issue 8. Basically, we want little sequences here and there showing Rabbit's trajectory as he's trying to find his way to his friends. But it's also a tool to be able to see parts of the Echolands that the rest of the story doesn't have the room for. Yeah.
So way back when we did the first one, I said that I just saw the character of Core and I was like, I feel like I'm going to love this guy. And I was on the money, because as we've gotten to know him more and more, I've been like, oh, I love him. He loves this. He got that new axe from the, I can't remember the I don't want to call him an alien, because I don't think they're an alien, but
the Oracle.
The Oracle. Got it from the Oracle, who I love that he just always has the cup of coffee on the Oracle table. But I will admit that when I first saw him, being that this is how I've seen characters that look like me and them and him in comics and stories, I was assuming he was going to play the kind of bodyguard or the mentor type role. But he's actually a romantic interest for Hope.
Yeah.
Which I have to thank you for, because it is nice to see people who aren't like the super buff, typical leading men characters be worthy of love as well. So thankful for that. What about those two characters do you think makes them work well together?
Hope and Core, I think. I think when Hope talks about him in some of her opening sequence monologues, it shows it's just not a romantic relationship. There's a real bonding friendship there. There's clearly a history there. But I think it also, I guess I can't help but talk about them in relation to what she also says about Romulus and what Core has voiced about Romulus in a couple places, which speaks to the possibility of some turmoil between the three of them. Because Hope obviously had a romantic relationship with Romulus in the past. So I guess, as powerful as Core can be as much of a warrior he can be, I feel like between him and Romulus, he's more capable of being the gentle giant, where Romulus is full of bombacity and ego. And I think how that led to Hope recognizing she needs something more than what Romulus can offer, regardless of the riches he possibly could give her. She needs that stability that Core represents. And there's quite frequently different instances where Core is trying to not control her, but kind of like be a guide, a friendly guide, much in the way a lover would be in concern over her well-being. But I also find fascinating that even though he might voice opposition in some scenes to some of her ideas, I find it cool that he ends up relenting and giving her the authority. Not really giving her the authority. That's the bad choice of words. Accepting her authority on the situation. So that I find that pretty fascinating. I'm really eager to explore more of their relationship as we get deeper into the series, and how meaningful it is between the two of them. And it's gonna play a very potent role and be tested as things develop and Hope finds herself on some dark paths that are coming up.
Interesting. And it's nice that there's it's not a simple relationship. I love that the way you describe it is a lot more complex. Yeah. So it's a lot more to dig into. And I love Romulus's look. I love the skull on his chest. And those two, I do think it's in issue 5. When he comes back, when we find out that he's it's issue 6. He comes back and they clash. It just goes straight to that.
Right. That history there is coming to a heated point. Clearly there had been some betrayals between everyone, between the three of them at various points in the past. And, Romulus, even though he claims to be this demigod, is very much the quintessential pirate, and cannot be trusted, and Core just refuses to do so. I find that, and it's cool that we're kind of talking about that that's the moment between these characters, and it shows this history between them, and they don't act like, oh, we've just met yesterday, and the fact that Romulus was willing to betray them to the wizard for self-gain, Core was just like, yeah, this is just one more example of this guy's fucking bullshit. Yeah. And I'm not going to stand for it. And so when he shows up there at the end, Core's like, that's it. Here's my moment to let him have it for all the bullshit over however many years it's been. Right. So
she uses that torch. Does that thing have a name? The torch sword that she stole from the guy she popped the pimple?
I call it. Yeah, we call it a fire lance, which I'm kind of stealing the name from Michael Moorcock. There's a Michael Moorcock in one of the books. I think it's the Hawkmoon books. He refers to some characters brandishing fire lances. Mm-hmm. I have no idea what that means to him, but this is my kind of take on it, a little nod to Michael Moorcock, because I just thought it was this cool little weapon, and it's a little bit mechanical too, right? Because she can keep it stored in her satchel, and it collapses down, and she can expand it, and it can be lance-like in length, but it's like this fiery energy weapon that she stole in issue 1 from those guards that were trying to Well, how did he
stop
put it?
them.
He was going to carve a T into her face with it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's just like a sick looking weapon. And I don't have a question about it, but when we finally get to see the wizard, that dude looks sick. That's all I have for that one. When we finally got the reveal of seeing him, it was like seeing the Emperor for the first time as a kid. Like,
yeah,
I was like, oh, this dude is evil.
Yeah.
With the wizard's daughter, I don't think she's been named yet, right?
She gets named in issue 6.
Did I miss that?
Or is it? No, it's in issue 5. At the end of issue 5.
Oh wait. He
yeah.
Enter. But
her name is Iris. So
okay.
It's an interesting name because it has dual meaning. The most obvious is the Eye of the Wizard, you know. But he himself, when we first, I have early drawings from when I was a kid of Taros Damon. And I originally envisioned him as a kid being this very foreboding, big, towering figure, muscly, armored. And when we started talking about doing the project, I had changed my view on that. I'm like, let's make this guy not look like the typical villain in terms of his appearance. In regards to being a wizard, I didn't want to create a character that looked stereotypically like a wizard.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not tall, thin, and gaunt with long hair. He's short, squat, and overweight. And I thought that would be kind of an interesting little thing to do. He's like a large nose. And I kind of feel like that helps, just his visual helps you relate to him being a human being more than
he looks human,
right? Rather than being an icon, an iconic typical wizard. One of my favorite things about dealing with that character is how we tackle him in the interviews. I don't know if you got to read any of those sections, but that really, his humanity really comes out in that, and it shows that he's not evil for evil's sake.
There's something there.
Right. He has a goal and a purpose, but is willing to commit evil to obtain that objective. If you get a chance to read those sections, I think you'll find them extremely informative. And
I really love the back matter.
Yeah.
The back matters. I was not expecting it to connect so seamlessly into the world. Like when I first saw the Oracle, I was like, oh my God, it's him. Now the wizard's daughter does have an explosive scene where she destroys pretty much the whole Romulus pirate town.
Yeah.
How long did that scene take you to do? Because it's got so much detail with all the werewolves and things. I was just curious, like, was that something that because it's all kind of shaped around the team being in this like little circle ball thing.
Yeah. Emphasizing how trapped they are. Yeah. That scene, the original writing of it, I think in the script, it actually has that bit with the werewolves being destroyed and as a separate panel from Hope and her teammates being underwater in that orb as 2 separate panels. But when it came time to draw it, that was, working in a book that has this type of format, there's learning curves and learning lessons always from here, that what we might have written on the page and what I'm thinking in my head visually might not work the way I think it would. And so I make adjustments as I go. And sometimes those adjustments are serendipitous in terms of creating symbolic imagery that has meaning. And that's a great example. By having the orb not be isolated into its own panel, but kind of more set into the main action above. So makes it more immediate. Like I said, emphasizes that they're trapped. Now, in terms of time, that was a trick. That took a lot of time figuring out how to lay out the werewolves, particularly in relation to, because I wanted to utilize the sound effect of her weapon going off, of Iris's weapon going off, as lettering, but also interacting with what is happening. So creating that circle that's coming out towards us and going back into the image with the lettering as part of the energy effect itself was tricky, and figuring out how to make sure that worked well. But it also was a nice favor to myself to do it that way, because it gave me a clear cut line on where I can show the destruction taking place of the werewolves. Like, that sound effect is literally cutting through them, along with all the fiery energy. A lot of rendering going on in that, because the werewolves, it's not specifically stated, but the werewolves, hopefully you can tell by the way they look and their coloring that they're from Horror Hill as well.
I think it's the shading that really sells them.
And then that was a tough page to do. I don't know how else to say it.
I think the way you explained. Yeah. Now, just one more thing before I have one more fun question for you. How much do you keep in mind about the physical crease in the page of the book? Because I know you said you have these two pages taped together. How do you kind of keep that in mind when you're you're laying out this thing? Because no matter what, in a physical format, it's going to have a crease at the bottom because that's where it's connected. How much does that come into play for you as you're designing?
It's extremely important. Early in my career, when I would deal with double page spreads, I was boneheaded and didn't think about the center gutter as much as I should have on occasion. And I would have things where I'm like, oh, that cuts the figure in a strange way, because I put them in relation to the gutter. I put them in a kind of odd place. So it cuts, like maybe it cuts their head, or part of their head gets swallowed, that sort of thing. So it's still a mistake I see happen from other creators that don't think about that gutter when it's being printed. I've seen some people on occasion make the same mistakes I've made, where something gets swallowed awkwardly. So the fact that I deal with so many double page spreads now, it's something I'm very, very aware of. And there's times where I have to kind of make decisions about, like, okay, what part of this image am I okay with being interfered with, and make kind of compositional choices to make sure key parts are the parts that are outside of that gutter, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's just something I was always curious about, like with artists, how they keep that in mind. So thank you for that insight.
Yeah, it can be tricky, because especially if you're dealing with a very busy page, it can be very, very tricky on how to avoid that. Particularly because, like, if you're not sure how, like, as an example, the printing can make a big effect. Like if you're working on a book that is what I would call a prestige format book, where it's a square bound binding, that gutter can be really problematic. So you have to be even more extra careful. If you're doing a regular floppy comic, stapled comic, it's usually not too much of an issue. But if that gets collected into a soft cover or hardcover, then it can become a bigger problem at that point. And so I have to think about those aspects ahead of time. So one of the things I was very much concerned about with Echolands was making sure that when doing the hardcover that it was sewn binding, so the book would open all the way up, and you'd have less of a gutter issue.
Interesting.
Yeah,
and I guess I'll get to know when I get to hold the physical one.
Yeah, and it's fascinating when you see things. You know, I always feel bad for the artists when I see something get swallowed up, or if the production people. As an example, Batwoman. Let's talk about Batwoman. The Batwoman hardcovers and soft covers, when those came out, they didn't think about how many double page spreads are in there. And they did production values on those where the binding swallows that gutter a lot. So the books don't open completely wide. That's very problematic when I feel like that can be solved through some simple thought processes of production. Another example, when we did Absolute Promethea, one of the things I wanted to have done was to ensure that to accommodate the double page spreads, that there was like hidden spacers placed into the digital files of the art, to accommodate that gutter loss, to kind of help mitigate it, that the reader wouldn't see those inserts, but it would allow them to see more of the art because it opens up more properly. That kind of stuff played it, you know, I think about all that kind of stuff. And I always feel bad for artists when, you know, they've done an elaborate double page spread. It's super design oriented. There's a lot of detail going on, but then through editorial decisions and production decisions, they don't consider that for what the artist did, and they just print it like a standard book, and then, you know, part of their artwork is interfered with in a way that it's detrimental.
And you lose some of that not the value, but you lose some of that that you lose the art itself.
Some of the effect that the artist was going for, yeah.
Now, the last thing we spoke about last time was the incredible back matter. And this time, same thing. Because we got 5 more issues since we last spoke, and I got to see 5 more spreads of the music you've been listening to. It's absolutely incredible for me that you include what type of vinyl it is, because I love seeing the type of vinyl that are out there.
Oh, right.
But something I noticed more and more is Wendy is your wife, right?
Yes.
I love that you put for Wendy, because the stuff that she's listening to is incredible, because I saw Guar on this list and I was like, oh, that's Wendy, because then it goes to Lizzo, and I was like, yeah, we listen to a lot of the same types of music. Now I got 2 questions for you from this. The first one, I want you to be ready for this one, because this one might be hard for you.
Okay.
Which one of the characters most likely listens to Lizzo? Yeah.
Oh. Let's think about that for a minute. Let's see.
Bet nobody asked you that one yet.
That's a stump. That's a stumper. I would say it's one of the characters that you would not expect, and they're attracted to the music because it's the opposite of. It sort of speaks to an inner life that someone might not be aware of. I'd say Castrum, of all people. I
love that,
because I kind of feel like it would be like one of those things, like, this is a terrible term, but almost for him it would be like a guilty pleasure sort of thing.
Yeah.
And the music would be so opposite of something he would hear and grew up on that he couldn't help but be attracted to it.
I love that. So I need to thank you, because I was going through these pages and I saw him, HIM, and him was very big when I was in middle school, and I was very hot topic then.
Yeah, I love them. They're great.
Ville Valo, is that his name?
Yeah.
This made me listen to both those albums again. I was like, ah, man,
I don't know if you've heard. I don't know if you've heard, but he's got a new album coming.
Does he? Is it him? Is it him or is it him?
It's called VV.
Oh, okay. I'll have to look. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it comes out next year.
I love looking at these pages. Is like it gives me more insight into who you are a little bit. I think so much David Bowie, which is what I listen to most of my life. So
cool.
Love that. But I do want to ask, what was the last album you bought?
Oh, the latest album.
Mm-hmm.
One of the I recently got the Mothra soundtrack from the original film.
Yeah,
I got that.
Was it a remaster or was it a?
Yeah, it's a remaster, colored vinyl, put out by Waxworks Records. Nice. It's the original score, expanded score, so it's got like all the little missing cues that previously might not have been available in this format. That's one of the things I got.
Is it
recently.
Colored?
Yes.
Is it her colors? Like, is it like a?
Wow! It looks almost like almost looks kind of like it could be snippets off of the Mothra's wings.
Holy I'm looking at it right now. Wow, that is a sorry, this is an audio visual for every medium that everyone's listening. That is a beautiful vinyl. It
is gorgeous.
Wow.
And then another recent purchase, which I was stoked to finally get, was a monster of a purchase, literally. But I had I had a bunch of trade I took into the local record store. And so I had a bunch of credit built up. And so I ended up using it on the Godzilla complete Showa soundtrack collection. It's like, I think it's like 15 or 16 Godzilla film soundtracks.
Is that the one with the, it's got like a very colorful cover?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a beautiful box set. We spent so much time talking about Godzilla yesterday because they announced two of the people who are going to be in the show. God, the soundtracks have always been such beautiful. Oh, because Bear McCreary is doing the Lord of the Rings show, and he did the new films.
Which could be interesting.
Yeah, especially because oh god, I just blanked on his name. Howard Shore, like one of them, and it's wild because he hasn't done like a lot of huge stuff. Like he doesn't come up in the conversations like John Williams does, but
correct.
He wrote. Like, I don't even like Lord of the Rings that much, but like I listen to those soundtracks on a loop because they're so beautiful. Yeah, they're fantastic. I got the multi-disc sets for each of those soundtracks. Do you have like a huge how do you store all your vinyl? Do you have bookcases? Yeah, pretty much. Got it. I use calyxes from IKEA, and yeah, they're called calyx. And then I also got it. Yeah, and then some of them use what they call iket. Mm-hmm. We have some stuff, in there. It takes up a good portion of my art studio. And it has to. Yeah. And then we have a couple other locations around the house where we have some shelves for them. Because, Wendy's got her own, as we spoke earlier, she's got her own sizable collection of her favorites too. Yeah. So I was just very excited to see Guar. I got to interview Guar a couple months ago, and it was one of those, wow, they really don't break character moments. Right. So yeah, they're outrageous, amazing stuff too. It's like, it was like a very deep conversation with someone named Pustulus. So I was like, this is one of the weirdest things I've done in my life. But I really do love that you include this stuff, because I think, again, it gives insight into the work. Because I think like seeing some of this stuff, I love that you're describing what they look like, because I don't the only vinyls I own are the Aquaman soundtrack ones, because I thought they were pretty. Oh, right. Yeah. I don't have a player. So, you'll have to get a player. Yeah. I don't know, because if I do, then I'm going to start buying them again, because I used to have like so many, and then they all got destroyed in an accident. But oh no. I don't know if I should open that door because I have one of those personalities where I'm like, I could buy like 9 more, right?
Yeah, right. I can understand that. It's a addictive hobby, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of the things about those, including those music lists, because I would post, here's what I'm listening to. I would post on Twitter or whatever, and take a picture of it. One of the things that I like listing what the format is for the music, because I kind of look at, they're almost like little artifacts to me, and I love the way they look, and there's almost a ritualistic aspect to putting a record on that I enjoy every little detail about that process. So, but when we did the Sandman Overture series, we did the same series in special edition form, which was sort of like showing the artwork in mid-process, where it's black and white. If there was something painted, we would show the color painting, and the lettering was placed on translucently. And in those, there would be like a little article that Shelley Bond had commissioned from, like, hey, Dave, can you talk about the color process, the coloring of Jim's spreads, or things like that. But one of the things that she asked for was for me to publish the music lists that I would, what I was listening to for Overture. And it was fun. And so when it came time to do Echolands and we were thinking about the back matter, we thought about, hey, the way this story is set up and the way printing structures are designed, you have to fill so many pages to meet a certain, printing signature, that inevitably you're going to have pages left over that need content. So you have 2 choices. Do you come up with additional content that you hadn't intended, or do you fill it with ads? And we decided to fill it with additional content. And because Echolands is an odd number of pages, it's slightly, a few more pages than typical comic, the signature zone had more extra space. And so that's when we were like, okay, we'll do the interview thing, we'll do the cartoon strip, we'll do the fake ads, and a letters page section, and then there still be a couple pages left there. And I said, well, let's do the music thing. And at first I was like, well, it'll be fun, but I don't know. We'll see if it really matters. And it turned out to be one of the most popular features. Yeah, I would hear from people. Yeah, I would hear from people saying, I love the new issue, but I gotta talk about the music section.
Well, I think the biggest thing for me is that, like, I'm not consuming as much physical media these days. So, like, I'm not going to like a record store to, like, I'm not going to places where people can recommend me stuff that I wouldn't have seen outside of my, like, day-to-day, if that makes sense. So stuff like this, where I'm like, oh, I should check this out. Like, this could be cool. Then I, like, can branch out and do more.
Yeah. It's fun. It's fun for people. And I guess like you had said, it gives you a little bit insight into the type of person I am in a weird way. And it also allows people to connect with me, like you were connecting with Wendy's choice about gore.
Yeah.
You're able to connect with somebody about something that's outside of the subject of comics. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it makes things a little bit more richer, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it adds so much to the work itself. Now, I do have one more. One came up. This one doesn't, but maybe in a future complete edition, would you, I don't know if the format speaks to it as much, but would you ever consider including scripts? Just because I was curious to see how much from the script makes it into the actual book and how much of, like, direction is in those.
Yeah, we had thought about it. We might do something like that for a larger, if the book does well enough to do a larger, like an absolute style version, we'd probably do that. One of the things that kind of prevented us from doing it this time, we had thought about putting little excerpts in the single issues, was because we were afraid of notes that we have to ourselves giving away things we don't want to give away yet.
That makes sense.
And we would have to go through all the pages and make sure, is this everything is redacted that needs to be redacted, right? And it's like, I didn't have time for that. Haden didn't have time for that. So we're like, we're not doing that. So,
I think this is the first comic that I've read in a very long time. I'm like, I really want to read the script for this because, like,
oh, cool.
It's such an interesting world. So hopefully there's enough buzz to get us a full collection.
Yeah, I hope so too. It'd be cool, particularly in terms of analyzing writing processes. I think it could be fascinating for people. Our scripting style is pretty dense. The amount of information we put into the script is quite a bit. There will be places where there's definitely lots of notes that I put in about what I want to do with the visuals or how I think a scene needs to function visually. I write all that stuff in there. So. I put all that stuff in there. But I think what people might find fascinating is the instances where I don't follow my own direction. So,
you write this whole thing out and you're like,
Right. Yeah. There's quite a few instances where, like, when I put on paper, I feel like, oh, that's not going to work the way I think it will. Or I'm like, nope, this will be cooler. This idea will be cool. And I make a lot of those decisions on the fly at the moment. They're more spontaneous. The other thing I think, I don't know if people find this interesting or not, but is places where we alter dialogue from the written script, because we put in full dialogue and we fret over that dialogue. Even though it's not a dialogue heavy book, we consider every line with equal weight. It's fascinating because in the process, sometimes we have to alter lines, or we feel like a line needs to say something slightly different, or we need to alter lines for pure physical reasons, because the format is so strange to work with that sometimes a line will need to say the same thing, but maybe in some way to truncate it by a few words, kind of things like that. And so there's interesting little alterations that we end up making. Or the dialogue will be moved. Well, like we'll say, no, the dialogue that was this panel, no, it's now over here in this panel. Stuff like that.
Yeah, and as I said, like I'm not typically someone who wants to like dig into their stuff that much, but like this is something I'm like, I really like this and I want to see what went into it. So fingers crossed. But,
yeah, I think there's certain sequences I think people you might find interesting, particularly the stuff that alters, or the way it's written might not match when you're reading it and you're thinking about how that looks, but then when you see the end result, you're like, oh, that's not what I pictured in my mind when I read it. Versus what I ended up drawing, but yet all those elements are still there. It's just because it's interesting because even when I'm writing for other artists, I put in visual ideas, for things. And I don't know if what I see in my head translates into what they see in their head, but that's just what I'm writing. And often, when I'm writing for myself, I do the same thing. And it's fascinating to me how what on the written page visually can spark one image in my head, but when I was writing it, but then when I draw it, it differs in some way from what you might think the visual is saying, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm so excited for more of this. So I'm excited, not trying to tell you to get a little faster, but I'm so excited to just keep seeing more of this world and get to explore more of it. People should be going to their local comic book shops if you have one. If you don't, hit up Third Eye Comics. They ship internationally, and they're super helpful to help you get this stuff to your house. Is there anything else people should be picking up from you in the near future? Or
there's a few things. I did a variety of things over the last year that are now coming out, oddly all similarly around the same time. So it looks like I crammed a bunch of stuff in, but they were all done.
Yeah.
So I did Wendy and I both did a song adaptation together of a Murder by Death song that's in a book of song adaptations that they're putting out. I'm not sure how many they're going to have on their website, but it was part of a Kickstarter thing. So we did that. That was 4 pages for a song called Space. It came out really cool. She wrote the concept and I illustrated it. And then we also did a song adaptation for Blondie, which is going to be in there Against the Odds graphic memoir that's coming out soon. But there's various song adaptations in that book as well as a kind of a biography story. And we got to do the adaptation of Fade Away and Radiate. Wendy and I did that together as well. That's 8 pages. And then I've done a few covers here and there. I did a few Detective Comics covers.
It's so funny that you did them too, because it's so musically inclined, this art. And the covers themselves. It feels so perfect.
Yeah, I've done 3. I don't know if I'll do more. It depends on time. I did a cover for my pal Francesco Francavilla for his book Night of the Ghoul that's coming out from Dark Horse in October. And I did a Sandman promo piece for Den of Geek magazine, which is a promo piece in conjunction with the launch of the next Netflix show. I think they published that on a SDCC exclusive edition of their magazine that focuses on the show. And then I did, what am I forgetting? I'm forgetting something.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. In terms of there's a poster book that has a bunch of my DC and Vertigo covers.
Wait, really?
Yeah. There's a poster book that just came out that features 20 plates that can be removed from the book and framed if someone is so inclined. That just came out. That has some good selection of covers I've done from various things. And picking those were interesting because we wanted a good selection of projects I've been involved with, but also tried to pick things that people might not realize I had done. So like my variant cover for American Vampire is in there, as an example. My variant cover for the Black Label Hellblazer book is in there. Things like that. Of course, Sandman and Batman and Batwoman.
That's interesting. You got to pick. I didn't know the artists were actually picking those. I thought it was. This isn't a DC setup one. I thought it was like a DC propaganda book. Like they were just like picking their favorites. But
I have no idea. I don't know if other people got that opportunity. I mean, I would imagine that they gave them the opportunity, but I also could see some artists going just whatever, pick whatever.
Yeah, because it's like more of a portfolio, like a portfolio that people can buy. Because like as much as I would sell a Vital Organ to own artwork you've done, it's like you're worth the money. So stuff like this is super cool to people who can't afford the original stuff, or if people already own the stuff they want.
Yeah, it looks nice. They did a nice job with it. And
it's going to be a while till I get to your Sandman stuff, which sucks, but I'll get there one day.
It'll be waiting for you.
Yeah. I hope it doesn't go anywhere.
I'm trying to think if there was something else that I can't. I guess I listed off everything.
It's a lot of stuff. You do quite a lot.
Yeah. Some of it was, things I couldn't say no to, like the Sandman Den of Geek promotional piece. My name was put forward from Neil to do it, and I don't want to say no to Neil. He's my buddy. So stuff like that. Same with with the Night of the Ghoul cover for Frank Avia. It was sort of like, he's my friend and he's asking me to do it, and he had done a cover for me for Echolands. So it's sort of like, did
he do Roses? Did I say her name?
Yes, he does. Yeah.
That's I love her. I'm very excited to see more of her too.
Yeah. And
yeah,
I guess,
but it's wild that like you're just saying like you're doing these things for your friends, and these are like people who like are just like huge names as well. So it's cool that you get to just do that stuff because like you're excited about it.
Yeah, it's super fun. So it was the same situation with I guess came out earlier in the year, or even maybe I can't remember when they were released. Maybe it was at the end of last year, but the Sandman Lock and Key crossover. I did the two variants for that, and that was because of I love Gabriel Rodriguez, and he and the editor both asked me to do it. I love them both. Chris Ryle, he's a super nice guy, and so it's hard to say no. There's quite a few things I've had to say no to just because of time. A lot of times I get asked from somebody to do something, but I've already agreed to do something else that kind of takes up that slot. And so I end up having to tell people no.
Mm-hmm.
I hate doing that, but at the same time, I have to, because I got Echolands to do too. So every time I do one of these things, it interferes with time on Echolands, even though sometimes it could be a nice palate cleanser, Yeah,
it's like you want a little something different, but
take a few days off from Echolands and do a Batman cover. It's like,
and God, those Batman covers are so good. Every time I see your art come out, I'm just so excited. But like, again, I'm very excited to see your other work, but I'm also excited to see more Echolands.
Cool. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
we're working on it. I've had quite a few people ask about it in the recent weeks.
I would rather you take your time than
what's that?
I would rather you get to take your time and like get the full product that you want out there. And with Image, I guess you can keep pushing things back, but like, is there a set date you have to have things by, or because it's your book, you get to kind of have control?
Yeah, it rests in our hands. Of course, Image wants it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
But they don't pressure. They don't pressure me to have it done by a certain time. Of course, they want it sooner because then they can. They feel like, and rightfully so, feel like it would just benefit the project. But at the same time, they also weigh that against, making sure the project is the best it can be is beneficial to the project too. So it's one of those things where it's out of my control. I can't draw it any faster, as much as I want it out more than anybody else does.
Yeah.
And I have to constantly tell myself, I berate myself a lot, and Wendy gets on me about it because she's like, you gotta, be careful and not, be negative about my work process. But I get tough on myself because I kind of like, God dang, this is taking so damn long, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know any other way to do it.
Yeah. But I mean, again, it's like, you can't rush what you're doing. And I'm not an artist, so I can't say that exactly, but like, the amount of detail in the stuff you're putting out, like, I'd rather you be able to get that than kill yourself, like, pushing yourself to put that out quicker. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's good that Wendy is there to hold you accountable to be nicer to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because sometimes we all need that.
Funnily enough, I just found that quote on my computer.
Oh, did you? What was it?
It's from Bill Hicks. It's a little long, but I'll read it anyway. It's funny. The world is like a ride in an amusement park, and when you choose to go on it, you think it's real because that's how powerful our minds are. The ride goes up and down, around and around. It has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored, and it's very loud, and it's fun for a while. Many people have been on the ride for a long time, and they begin to wonder, hey, is this real, or is this just a ride? And other people have remembered, and they come back to us and say, hey, don't worry, don't be afraid ever, because this is just a ride.
That's a really good quote.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for being here again. You can catch us at gatecrashers.fan, on all social media at gatecrasherspod, and we'll see you again next week.
See ya.
It's the Gatecrashers.